What's up, dude? Everyone who joined in, what's up? Alright, I think we got enough people. So what I was saying earlier, I've had someone ask me on the channel if I could explain my inventory layout. So I'm gonna do like a little PowerPoint, not really a PowerPoint, but just a little bit explaining like what is it behind each weapon and why every single one of those weapons are there and why it changed over time. So alright, to start off, like I always base my inventories around the idea that I favor one weapon, obviously Claymore, and then I build around it. So what I mean by I build around it, like Claymore has its strength, you know, it's an hyper armor weapon, fast hyper armor. It's kind of not great at roll catching, so it makes sense that you're gonna have like roll catching weapons all around it, because that's really the main weakness of the Claymore. So you want to have some roll catching options next to it. So here, like the main idea behind this particular layout is I have this cross there where one tick up and I have this quick dagger swap that's very useful. My favorite thing to do with the dagger swap is I'll connect an attack or even two attack, and then I'll switch to that dagger really quickly, and the opponent won't really see it happening, because by the time, just pay attention to my character. Whoops, sorry, I didn't do it there. Just pay attention to the character. Like you see the swing finish, you don't really have time to react to the dagger swap and then the dagger, unless you're like already panicking. So from there, if you connect that dagger attack, most likely, since people don't expect to get hit by like something as fast as a dagger, they'll panic roll afterward. So that's why a roll catch here would be good as well. And by that I mean a weapon art. Obviously you can do that with a lot of other weapons, it's just that Corian has always been one of my favorite and best weapon. But yeah, same thing here. I have a straight sword from neutral. I like to switch to the straight sword here sometimes for wake ups. I think it's I used to, like before, I used to switch to the two-handed Lotric because it has more active attack frames on the two-handed R2 like that. But recently I've been switching to just the one-handed Ring Knight, so I can cancel it. So if I miss the R2, I can just cancel it and then still chase my opponent, you know, just like that. So I think it's very useful for that. So another use for having a straight sword next to the great sword is say I'm spacing my opponent. Let's just lock onto the scrap right there. I'm spacing my opponent. The speed and the range of a greatsword is going to be quite different from a straight sword. Even if it looks similar, a straight sword is actually longer. Actually, is it? I don't actually know. But in a fight, I know that the spacing is quite different, and from neutral you can easily swap to a straight sword just to space your opponent and catch him off guard. Obviously, the other one that I use a lot, you're gonna see me using Follower Saber weapon art a lot against shield. So having a dark claymore, I would not necessarily need like a guard break option, but since I'm on a physical build, a lot of times people will try to just turtle me, you know, because they can just go in, like force you, just run around you, and since I have no chip, there's really nothing I can do against shield besides, you know, reverse backstab and stuff like that. So a good idea is always to have something that can guard break. And before I used to do like I used to switch the claymore to the Lotric, but over time I realized it's not reliable enough, and a viewer of mine has suggested that I try out the Follower Saber a long time ago, and so I did, and I never came back afterward. It's a really great option for guard breaking. So have a shield in front of you, quickly swap the Follower Saber, easy guard break, and then after that you can either switch back to Claymore for a riposte, or if you have enough time, I switch back to Lido. But if you wanted to, you can have another like high damage weapon right under the saber. That would be easier to pull off. But a lot of times I won't switch to Lido if I'm in the middle of a gank, because if I switch to Lido, I'm fat rolling. So if I get the riposte with Lido and I'm fat rolling after, if there's people waiting for me after a riposte, I'm in trouble. So I might as well just stick to Claymore. Maybe get less critical damage, but at least I'm not compromising my escape after the riposte is over, right? And then to follow this up, obviously, Claymore is great against all small weapons, you know, has great hyper armor, everything, even against Halberd, it's amazing, counters Halberd very well. But still, you're gonna get all poised by all the ultra classes. So having the Lido is gonna be very useful against all the bigger weapons. I don't personally use Lido as a main weapon because I'm fast rolling with it. I really only use Lido for swaps. And I don't use it as a main weapon also because it's just too big on the screen, and a lot of times when I try to use that as a main weapon, sometimes I just can't see what my opponent is doing, so I have trouble reacting to my opponent. And in a gank, you really don't want that. It just takes up too much of the screen, so if you just use it to trade like this with a weapon art and switch back after, you don't need to worry too much about the Lido being too big on the screen, right? Also, another reason why I got Lido right there, because I tried a long time ago to just have, you know, Claymore and then right away Gundyr. But after I discovered the stance escape, once you get hit on your back, I have a video about that. Once you get hit in your back, I'll link it in the description for next time. For those of you on Twitch, you can actually type exclamation mark stance escape or something like this, and you'll see it. But yeah, basically, if you get hit on your back by certain attacks, you can do weapon art to escape. And if you're fast enough, you can actually just swap to Lido and do a punish. I have not implemented that in my gameplay yet, but I mean, you add stuff as you go to your game. Like, no one has really started utilizing this, but eventually it's going to come in the future where people use stance escape. Thanks for the Albert or Fun. Thanks for the exclamation mark for the whatever it's called, the command. There you go. Thanks, Reggie. Thanks, guys. Yeah. So basically, over time, as people get used to neutral swaps and all, they'll start implementing stance escapes, and you'll see people baiting, getting hit on your back to then swap to something that has a very high punish, like a Lido weapon art, and get a full punish out of that. So you're going to see more of that in the future. You don't see it much often now, but my inventory is ready for that eventuality where this, you have like the biggest punish pretty much right there, right in the pocket, right as a, like, you want the most important swaps to be only one tick away. And then I have Gundyr. Reason why Gundyr is not right away there, it's because I don't necessarily need it to be right away there. I've gotten fast enough over time. Ideally, though, I'd probably have Gundyr right away and maybe the straight. I would probably, like, if in the best of world, I'd probably have the Lido there and the Gundyr there because I use it more than the straight sword. But for now, I think that's good enough. And then as far as all the other weapons go, another thing that's important in all my all my inventory layouts is when I do these parries that you guys see me do often, where I remove my weapon. This is the fastest parry, by the way. You could do that by, you know, if you had a Kestis, you could do those parries by like switching weapon, but you actually get 2 more inputs doing that. So if you remove your weapon, it's technically faster and it's 1 motion. So you can actually reaction input a remove weapon parry, like even against a curve sword. Like you're getting hit all of a sudden by a curve sword, you get whiff punish. You have enough reaction time to just react to it and parry the 3rd swing. Obviously, you need a good connection for that, but all of this just to say that the remove weapon parry is important in my gameplay. Started utilizing it more and more. And when you remove your weapon, every time you remove your weapon and you go to re-equip, it always defaults to the first weapon in your inventory. So because of that, the first weapon in your inventory, it's going to be very important that it is a crit heavy weapon, And what I mean is just a weapon that does a lot of crit damage. And obviously, lucky us, Chaos Daggers and Fire Daggers tend to be first in the inventory by default. So having a Fire Dagger on a physical build, you know, Sharp Dagger on a sharp build, or Chaos Dagger on a dark build, and so on and so forth. It's going to be very important to have that as your first slot. And sometimes I like to change my inventory layout by effect, and if I'm on the dark build, by default the Fire or Chaos Dagger will still be first because I won't have any physical weapons, and I'll probably remove my simple Kestis. So afterward, you have Heavy Harp. I'm always on the fence about Heavy Harp because it's very suboptimal, but it's still a harp. Let's see the damage there. Where's the damage? Okay, there you go, 247. 247 on a harp, not great. Just by reference, if you have a Murky on a strength build, it's going to do 271 physical, so only the physical is already much better than the harp. So I mean, still, a harp will win you a lot of matchups, even on low damage, so I still keep it for that. Actually won my best of 9 versus Assassin with a heavy harp, even though it does very little damage. So it's still a top weapon regardless. And then recently I've added the Poison Dagger. Sometimes when the opponent is stalling, very laggy, and you're only going to get some ghost hits. Ghost hits are hits where you kind of hit your opponent, but the damage does not register because they roll the damage, but you still see that little bleed effect still. But they roll it, but they're going to get poisoned anyway over time if you manage to hit those shots. So it's going to be very useful to at least have one weapon in your inventory. It doesn't need to be a Grew Dagger necessarily, but one poison weapon in your inventory just to be able to deal with people that have very high latency, you know? So that's the reason behind the Grew Dagger there. Corvian here, pretty much self-explanatory. We went over it. Lothric Straight Sword. Here, well, first of all these straight swords, you know, there's a lot of them. Keep in mind that I also prioritize this cross right there. So as long as my Corvian is above my Claymore, you know, Straight Sword, Saber, Lido, Gundyr, like some of those weapons are still kind of fillers, you know what I mean? I picked the best weapon in the filler that would like fit there, for instance. So here, like, I basically need like 1, 2, 3, like 4 straight sword, right? So I'm gonna have 4 straight sword because of that. But if I had to carry Murky, I'd probably replace either the Lothric sword or the dark sword, and I would just keep one of them. So the Lothric sword, what's great about it is, like I said, the two-handed R2 has more attack frames than your usual attack, so it's very easy to catch people panic rolling. You can get them in chains where you just R2, R1, R2, R1, and over. And because the R2 is the attack that's going to roll catch them, an R2 will have more poise damage than a two-handed R1. So because of that, it's going to be harder for them. They're going to need more armor to be able to double roll through it if it catches them in their roll hyper armor frames. If you don't know what that is, I'd suggest you join the Discord because it's an entire different topic. There is such thing as roll poise in this game, where sometimes you'll be able to roll through attack taking damage, but you're not going to get stunned because you have hyper armor. So the stronger the attack is, you're not going to be able to roll through it. And a Corvian Weapon Art is one of these attacks where you're not going to be able to roll through it. Unlike, say, a one-handed straight sword, you're going to be able to roll through that. So moving on, you have the Dark Sword, Heavy Dark Sword, just straight up highest AR for a straight sword on a strength build. Morion Blade, low HP, kind of need a Morion Blade on each build at this point if you're tryharding. In Invasion, maybe not as much. Because in Invasion, you don't want to stay at low health unless you're going for like a specific like hyper mode build. But in duels, you're definitely going to get low HP at some point in your fight. And being on Red Tearstone Morion Blade will really give you an edge when you're on low HP, and it lets you come back in the game by like 1 combo or 2 combo, and then all of a sudden the game is even or you killed your opponent. Okay, moving on. We explained all of these already. Heavy S-Stock. Okay, so that's another one that's kind of iffy. Obviously, S-Stock is not the kind of weapon you want on a heavy build, but it is still a S-Stock, so the use of having just a rapier period on a build like this is sometimes you'll want to get that second grab. If you guys don't know, rapiers have that bigger window time-wise to get a backstab, so it has the same speed as a dagger or as a straight sword if you want to grab, but it lingers longer, so you're gonna get people that will run back in the backstab window and they'll get grabbed by a rapier. So it's always useful to have some sort of rapier in your inventory. And other than that, crossbow and S-Stock is very good to deal with Murky or PKCS. So it's always, it's never a bad idea, I'm gonna put it that way, it's never a bad idea to have a S-Stock on your build, even if you're on a dark build and it's not that great, even if you're on a strength build and it's not that great, you can still have an S-Stock on your build just for that moment where you're facing against something and you feel like the little moveset of the S-Stock would give you an edge, right? So it's still worth it. And then you have the Andax. Andax, recently I've switched. Before that, you know, I'd have either the Yorm or the Dragon Slayer Great Axe there, and then I'd have the Twin Axe over there. But recently I've switched to the Hand Axe because sometimes what I like to do is I'll start switching my offhand weapon, like I'll two-hand my Claymore like this, and instead of switching my main weapon, say I buffed my weapon at the beginning of the fight, if I can do it. There you go. Say I buff my weapon. I don't necessarily want to like waste my buff if I get a backstab or something on a guy and I want to swap to get him, but I don't want to lose my buff, so I can just swap my offhand weapon, surprise him with the Hand Axe, and get some good damage. Hand Axe does, what is it, around 400 AR? Yeah, 410, so very good damage. Heavy Hand Axe is, I mean, Hand Axe is a strength weapon, so you're going to get some good damage out of a Hand Axe. It's just a straight up fast, reliable weapon for a strength build. Usually, maybe not use an Hand Axe on other builds, but on strength builds, it is worth it because it does a lot of damage. It is faster than a straight sword, believe it or not. It's actually faster in the offhand as well, and it is good at roll catching, you know. Two-handed curve sword, very good at reaction roll catching. Hand Axe just sits right outside of that, so if you just prediction timing just enough, you can actually roll catch almost as good as a two-handed curve sword. Not as much, but almost. And moving on, obviously Twin Axe. If you're invading, guys, there's no reason not to carry a Twin Axe, because Twin Axe probably has the easiest damage to punish you can do on someone in this game. So if you get someone who whiff punishes a lot, you need that burst damage. You cannot get a critical on them. Easy damage, just outspace them, L1, L1, easy money. You get like almost 1,000 damage. You know, like 800 damage. If you buff it with bundles, that's even more. So always a good idea to have a Twin Axe on your build. It's also good if your opponent, if you plan on punishing your opponent healing, you know, say you get your opponent low and you don't want to switch to a dagger or a fast weapon because you know the opponent is going to have time to heal, why not switch to a twin axe instead? Let your opponent heal and punish that heal so that your damage out damages their heal. So you let them heal and punish their heal with the Twin Axe for even more damage than they can heal up. So that's always a good strategy. And then Tailbone Spear. There's no particular spot I would want this on the build. It just sits there. Any spot will do. But it's good to have a Tailbone Spear for those moments. Like Tailbone Spear, Force, anything. I'm sure you guys have seen some moment where I'll jump someone across a corner and just hit them with that wind. It's always useful, especially in Invasion. It's one of those cheeky little gimmick that can sometimes save you a lot of trouble. And there's no reason not to carry one if you have the room in your inventory. Okay, moving on. Heavy Great Lance. I don't use it much for Invasion, but it is definitely one of my staple weapon. I I've won some tourneys with Great Lance. Actually, I've won the biggest tourney with Great Lance, so it's not a weapon to be slept on. It is very hard to use, but personally, I really like Great Lance because it has the very powerful shield poke that does a lot of damage, and it has that amazing combo where R1 combos into Weapon Art for 1000 damage. That does a lot. That works too. And then, surprisingly, people don't really know that, but Great Lance is actually a complete weapon because you have that R2 right there that has amazing tracking, two-handed mind you. Do not use that one-handed that has shit tracking, but two-handed will have great tracking. It's very good at roll catching anything, and if you fully charge it, it cannot be parried. The thing you have to worry about the most when using Great Lance is definitely getting parried on reaction. Your best bet is to shield poke. That is a lot harder to parry on reaction. But yeah, fish a lot for backstab if you're using Great Lance. So personally, one of my favorite weapon, Great Lance. So it definitely has a place on my build, especially in a strength build. Great Lance is a strength weapon, most efficient on a strength build. And you want your Great Lance to be physical because it does thrust damage and will get you counter damage as well. Alright, so moving on, Ring Knight Spear. Ring Knight Spear is a quality weapon, but on a build like mine that has hybrid stats, it fits very well and it does almost the same damage. Surprisingly, guys, once you buff your weapon like this, the running attack, not this one, but if you do this running attack right there, the difference is here, if I'm buffering the attack, see I'm blocking before the running, it doesn't have the fire effect. If you don't block, it has the fire effect. That little fire effect adds a lot of damage, like more than any other spear, surprisingly. So that spear is very good for chase down, does a lot of damage. It has a complete moveset. You know, usable R2 all the way. Even that weapon art, you know, you don't do it straight to someone, but it can still catch people if they're not like paying attention. You can still use it. Rolling attack also great, same one-handed, great rolling attack, great one-handed R2, same thing. So a very good weapon, very complete spear. It has just a full moveset. It's a great spear all around for physical builds. If I was on an elemental build, I'd probably use the War Banner for invasions, because War Banner benefits the most from having split damage, because the weapon art is a damage buff, so it buffs both the physical and the elemental part of the spear. So that's that. And also you cannot buff a War Banner with a bundle if you have the weapon art applied, so it's pretty pointless to have a War Banner physical, if you ask me. Alright, moving on. Split Leaf. I don't use Split Leaf often, but I have it because I really want to learn the Split Infinite, like you're seeing here. Like I haven't been practicing much, but I'm sure if you guys watch Grim or Gino, Grim does it with a macro, Gino does it legit. Let's try again. No. Timing is very specific. It's definitely doable because Gino does it all the time, but there you go. Okay, so yeah, if you get the timing down, it's definitely doable reliably, but you're gonna need some practice for this, and I'm gonna need some practice for this eventually if I spend some time just wanking at the crab here. Gundyr, you know, self-explanatory. It's just Gundyr is just honestly, it's a gimmick weapon art that does not work on good players unless you really time it well. But it's gonna be very easy to kill inexperienced casual players. You know, it's very good for a lot of situations. Easy damage. After a backstab, it's always an easy wake up that will do you a lot of damage, and it's fairly safe because you have hyper armor while doing it. But if you use that carelessly against another good players, you're gonna get destroyed. That weapon art is, as much as it is easy to pull off on some people, it will get you killed if you do it mindlessly against others. Although if you're ganking, I mean, you can pretty much throw whatever you want, and it's always pretty safe. Here I have a heavy whip. That's always a sleeper. A whip is just to have something to cheese people through walls, just annoy them. You know, if people want to stay in a bonfire, not the bonfire duel, but have a gank that just stays at the bonfire and they don't want to come out or do anything. It's always great to have a whip just to annoy them. Moving on, we have like just a row of fists here. Always have, on all of my build, I always have two simple item. Doesn't matter which item it is. Simple Kestus. I prefer Kestus just because it is the lightest simple item that you can infuse. So just carrying two simple thing. If I'm out of blue completely, I just equip two simple Kestus, re-get my blue, and we move on from there. One physical, or not one physical, but one Kestus that's spec for damage. And usually the one that's spec for damage, I'll keep it as my secondary backup weapon on all my builds. Because a lot of times you'll want to reset your poise, so it's very easy. If someone challenges you, what I mean by that is if he attempts to attack you while you're doing Perseverance, if you have a blessed item, it is not going to punish them nearly as much as if you had it spec for damage. So a damage spec Kestus will do you a lot more than if it was blessed. If you're keeping it in your offhand, maybe it is a good idea to have it blessed because its main function is to give you regen over time. But if you're like me, either you'd want to have your left hand open to not have anything bothersome, or you could have a blessed warrior shield, because obviously you're probably not going to be doing that remove weapon parry, which is the main reason why you would want to keep your offhand empty. But see, me for instance, sometimes I do use the blessed warrior, but the danger with that is that I'd be fat rolling with my gun deer. So have to know your build's limitation there. Okay, simple Kestus, I don't need to go over that. Demon Fist. Demon Fist is good, especially on a build where you don't have many weapons to deal with shields. So here on this particular build, like some weapons that I would use to deal with shields are Harp, Corvian, and Saber. Those are pretty much it. The other weapons pretty much all get hard countered by shields. So the Demon Fist, all of a sudden, you have a Demon Fist in your offhand, you can use any weapon out there in your main hand. And for instance, I prefer to use the Dark Sword with it. And what the Demon Fist has special against shields is that it gives you a very high stamina cost per stamina damage ratio. So like 1, 2, 3, 4, like that is going to guard break them most of the time. So just 4 fists like this. And if you do it in the middle of combat, you know, you stagger your hits like this, you're forcing them to roll. You're not necessarily going to guard break them. I think it is actually 5 hits to guard break someone, it depends on their stamina, guys, you know. But no matter if you guard break them or not, that's not the point here. It just does so much stamina damage that you're forcing them to roll. So if you stagger your hits like that, they can't trade out if they're blocking, and you're forcing them to roll, so you can go for a roll catch with your main hand weapon if you pressure their shield. I use this setup quite often when I'm dueling a shield. Haven't much recently, but that's for another day. And then finally we have the bow. Obviously bow is for machine gunning people, Estus refill. The bow is just for dishonesty, really. You're not going to use it. Although you could, I mean, if you want a meme. I've seen some people use the bow in combat, but this is just for bow glitching, straight up. Afterward you have Millwood. I have my Millwood right above the repeating crossbow, so if there's someone that I feel is very dishonest, I can do the machine gun swap really easily because everything is right next to each other. So I can just quickly swap one tick up and then I'm ready to machine gun. So that's good for that. This is also the reason why I have so many crossbows. It's to have those right above each other. Other than that, if it wasn't for the machine gun, I'd probably scrap the repeating crossbow, and I would also scrap the light crossbow. I would just keep Arbalest, night crossbow, and Avalon. And reason why you'd want Arbalest, it's just the best crossbow damage-wise. Night crossbow, chip damage. Avalon, easiest roll catch, especially for a finisher. When the guy has tier, you can hit them multiple times. It's just the best finisher. Afterward, you got Parting Flame. It's just for Estus refill. Then you have a Chime. Here, a lot of people will go with Saint Tree Belvine because it has the innate faster cast speed. But the reason why I don't is because I like to not have to go through that extra menu. You know, when I'm switching from a weapon to another, see that? Unable to use this item effectively. I have to go through an extra click in order to equip it. So just that little time right there, that downtime of that extra click, kind of makes up for the casting time actually. So not having to get an extra click makes up for the extra casting time that you'd get from the Saint Tree. So just the Priest Chime, because it has the low stat requirement of 10 Fate, which I have, or actually, yeah, 10 Fate, there you go. And I still have a Sacred Chime of Felinor. A reason for that is sometimes, it is very rare that I'll need to do that, but sometimes if my opponent is just, let's get some blue though. Sometimes if my opponent is stacking regen buffs and you need to mirror them, you can still, even if you don't have the stats, you can still cast it with Bow Glitch, so it's always useful. You still have access to a regen buff, even on the physical build, that don't have the stats for Felinor. But it is kind of a lot of trouble to cast, as you can see. You need to equip a bow, you need to cast with a Chime once, cast with a Chime twice, all of this just for one Felinor buff. So it is not very convenient. If you can get the Felinor without all that hassle, it's definitely better. And moving on, we have all the shield rows here. Blessed Warrior Shield, it is the lightest item that lets you infuse and weapon art in the offense. So obviously the lightest item to weapon art is just to have nothing in your offense and you can weapon art. And then the lightest item period to get some infusion is the Kestis, but as you guys know, it's a parry. So the lightest item to get infusion and weapon art is the Blessed Warrior Shield. Then a parry small shield, it's always useful if you want to get, you know, a good parry. Small shield have the most parry frames. I think Buckler has a bit more, but small shields are, I don't want to say it, I don't know if I'm wrong on this, but I think they're like 1 frame faster than the Buckler or something like this. Then for the shield that you would use in combat, Lothric Knight Shield, the pretty much one of the best physical shield if you want a parry and a good block. Sometimes it's better to have a parry even if it's a bad one with 100% physical than having a weapon art. Against a spear, like the spear really just cannot attack you twice on the shield, so you can kind of build a strategy around just the fact that they cannot do something safely, even if that parry is not necessarily good because it doesn't have a lot of parry frames. And then Lightning Infused Lothric Shield, everyone should have that on their build. It completely shuts down any light or fate damage, lightning damage, you know, any lightning spell cast. You just equip that. What is it, 95%? Yeah, 95% or almost 96% lightning reduction. So always good to have that. Crest Shield, kind of optional. It's the shield you'd want to use if you you want some a shield that defends well against dark. Here's a little thing you might not know that I don't see a lot of people doing. If you want to turtle up, you can actually do this with this shield. You go on a strength build like I do, and all of a sudden, I'm on a strength build. I have 188 fire defense, which is very, very good. Then you have 28 fire absorption, which is still high. Stack a red bug pellet on top of that, and all of a sudden you've negated a dark build completely with a shield that covers the dark defense with 86. By comparison, the Black Knight shield is 85 fire. So you're completely blocking dark here, and your armor, your bug pellet, and your strength defense covers the fire part of a dark build. So you've pretty much shut down the chip damage of a dark build by doing so. So that is a good reason, especially on a strength build, to have a crest shield. You could go for a great shield variant. You know, there's a great shield that has more a dark absorption, but obviously it's a lot heavier. You need more stats investment for it. This is just very light shield only. 14 strength requirement, very light, 5 units. Alright, moving on. Black Knight shield, pretty much self-explanatory. Ethereal Oak shield, same thing. It's just a physical shield with regen on it, lighter than the Black Knight. Then you have Havel. Havel, I don't use it often, but if you want to be cheeky sometimes, you can you can do that weapon art and surprise people. Keep in mind that weapon art will remove your tier, okay? So check this out, guys. If I cast tier, it breaks the rocks instantly. So you cannot have tier and the rock, and if you do the rock, whoops, that's not what I meant. Look at my little icon on the top left of the screen. It's going to disappear, the tier icon. See there? It removes your tier of denial. So just keep that in mind if you're using that. Also, Havel Great Shield. It's pretty good for chasing down people. Believe it or not, it's a good Great Shield for you two-hand it and you chase down people like this. The running attack is quite good actually, so I use it for that as well, and obviously as one of the best shield in the game. It's just that you have to change your armor when using it because it's very heavy. And finally you have the giant door. The reason why my giant doors are there specifically is so that I can actually use it. Let's change our build to what it's supposed to be. So I can actually do 2 ticks and then go for a shield weapon art in my inventory because it's only 2 ticks above my greatsword. So I can actually do that, or I can just block someone in a doorway. I've done that a few times. It's very rare that you're gonna see me do that, but I still do it from time to time. Alright, so that covers it. That's pretty much the entire inventory layout, guys, that I have. I know I've went through a lot of people, donations, subs, everything, questions. Now I'm going to be answering and thanking all of you guys. Thanks a lot for listening to that bit. I'm not going to do this often, but someone asked me a question a little bit ago about, he wanted me to explain my inventory, so here I go. This is going to go on the channel later. Alright, thanks for listening to that, guys.